welcome to the Sanctuary, a safe space to speak from the heart. I'm Israel, your host, and my guest today is Sharon Eby, the author of Bigfoot Beyond Belief. I want to get everything right. A study in cultural anthropology of what people believe about Bigfoot slash Sasquatch. I got that right?
Yes, you did.
Thanks for coming on the show, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, how did you get into writing this super interesting book? Like, what is the story behind the book, Bigfoot Beyond Belief?
Well, I was always interested in the topic, even as a kid. I would read books about UFOs and Bigfoot and aliens and whatever monsters, cryptozoology. And I didn't really get into it though. I had heard stories around, but when I was camping with my family in New Mexico, I'm from El Paso, Texas originally, and in the desert. And when we were camping at night, uh, my my son and nephew had a sighting, an encounter
Mm.
with a creature that we couldn't figure out if it was Bigfoot or not. But after investigating it and really digging in thoroughly, we figured it had to have been because there was no other logical explanation for what
Mm.
they encountered. And a couple years later, there was another Bigfoot sighting in the area in
Mhm.
east of El Paso near where I lived, and I just jumped in with both feet and became a Bigfoot investigator at that point. I was a ufologist for many years before that, so
Okay, so
wasn't hard
we'll
that
come back
hard of
to
a leap.
Bigfoot. Yeah, we'll come back to Bigfoot, but I'm actually fascinated about UFOs. How did you get into investigating UFO sightings?
I had a sighting when I was 13, and like I said, I'd been reading about these kind of topics all my life. And when I was in my mid 20s, we lived in Nebraska, and I had meetings that we were going to for um, alleged alien abductees, and they were just experience or support group type meetings. And we discovered that I'd had not only had very strange experiences all my life, but that there were some classic
Oh.
signs and symptoms that go along with that, and that we fit the criteria in our family. My family had had a lot of experiences, and I've had, I believe it's 4 UFO sightings to date, and 3 of them with witnesses. So that's pretty
Oh, wow.
significant. Most people don't have
Yeah.
one their whole life. So yeah, so I haven't written about it too much, a little bit online, but the Bigfoot I have
Mm.
written about. So
So, why not write more on the UFO part, rather than focus on Bigfoot?
I will be in my not as too much in my next book, but in the one after that, it's a three book series, and I will be
Okay.
covering UFOs in my third book and all my experiences and my families and things that have happened. Absolutely.
Mm, mm, mm. And well, let's jump back. So your son had the sighting, and then you had one close in El Paso. You mentioned.
Yes,
And
my
how long have you been spent writing this book,
I spent,
Bigfoot Beyond
well, it was
Belief?
about 20. Yeah, it took about 20 years of collecting information, but it took about 4 years to write the book, and it's a tome. It's huge. It's 586 pages.
Whoa.
It's huge.
It's not
Yeah.
something you sit down in an
It's
afternoon for sure.
no, it's more like a textbook because it's an anthropological study, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and it covers
So
what people believe rather than trying to
yeah,
prove whether Bigfoot is real or not. It's actually just studying what people believe about it, the whole gamut, right?
yeah. What are some of the beliefs you found while you were working on your book?
Wow. Well, there's different ways to understand reality and how people have experiences, and some of that is cultural.
Hmm.
Sometimes it deals with people's backgrounds, their attitudes and their belief systems, their cosmology, how they see the world and their place in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did questionnaires and surveys and things like that, but I found that there's basically 5 types of people
Mm.
that believe in Bigfoot, and these these are more like archetypes, but in a way. But there's called the true believer, and then there's the critical thinking scientist type. Then there's a conspiracy theorist type, and then there's what we call a true skeptic, and then you have your average
Mm.
person that's kind of a mishmash of those other ones and that don't fit in any particular category.
Conspiracy theorist. What are some identifiers of those two archetypes?
Well, the true skeptic is an extreme version of somebody who's just skeptical, because you have the critical thinking scientists, let's say, and they're going to be skeptical naturally. But a true skeptic tends to be someone who's such a critical thinker that they actually can become what's called a disbelieving skeptic, where they automatically
Oh,
discount and disbelieve and just say that there is no such thing as Bigfoot, regardless of any type of anecdotal or physical evidence whatsoever.
okay.
You can
Okay.
get those kind. Yep. And the conspiracy theorist, of course, is all over the information. They're like, oh, Bigfoot disappears, and they have special camouflage and abilities, and they're really part of the UFO. They're like related to the aliens, and
No
and
way.
there are some overlapping data that shows UFOs are in the same areas as Bigfoot sightings that people
Oh,
have, and some people that claim to have been on board a UFO say on a craft, they say that they have seen creatures that look like Bigfoot. They're big, hairy, animal type beast people. And so,
Mm.
there's some theory, some ideas, hypotheses really, that maybe these are one
Mm-hmm.
and the same. Some people think they're strictly animals, but the conspiracy theorist is going to go like, it's the government's fault, or they're just experiments, or they're related to the UFOs and stuff like that.
Mm. Mm. So I mean, my I guess introduction to Bigfoot is really shows on the Discovery Channel, like Finding Bigfoot. I think that's one of the shows, and I
Hmm.
mean, it looks so staged, and things like that. So you're like, oh man, these people are just doing this for entertainment value. And but the show's been going on for years and years. I don't know how many seasons is on now, but like
It,
whatever it is they're doing,
yeah,
the yeah.
yeah, I think it ran from around 2010 to 2017. I'm not sure if it's on
E-
reruns now, or if they've picked it back
Oh,
up.
maybe
But
it's on reruns,
Tyler,
right?
I'm not sure, but Tyler Bounds was one of the people that was involved in that, and he is one of the 23 researchers that I sent a questionnaire to of 7 questions,
Oh.
and asked what they believe about Bigfoot and what their experiences are in the field and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Where does he
fascinating
fall in the
stuff.
five archetypes?
Where does he fall?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't analyze them that way.
Oh,
Um,
okay, okay,
I
okay.
I didn't analyze. No, I took very specific questions and asked um, these 23 researchers these 7 questions, and I wanted to know about their background and what they believe and what their experiences were, and had they seen a Bigfoot and things like that. So I wasn't trying to analyze them
Mm,
as far as archetypes,
okay.
but to
Yeah.
dig a little deeper than that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So.
Yeah. But so I was saying like shows like Finding Bigfoot for sure. But then I, I, as I watched, it seemed like I guess I went off thinking, say if Bigfoot was real, would it be one Bigfoot, or like different big, is it Bigfoot, big feet, Bigfoots? Like, what's the plural of a Bigfoot?
I I covered that actually in my book, that what do people call it in the plural? And some people
Yeah,
say
yeah.
big feet, some people say Bigfoots, some people say squatches. There's all these different terms, and I kind of covered that in a very small area in my book because that's one of the questions, right? That people want to
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has a different answer. There's no right or wrong answer. The most
Yeah.
common one that's considered, I don't know, real or authentic is just to say Bigfoot for plural and singular. So,
Oh,
but some
okay.
people
Yeah.
say big feet or Bigfoots.
So, but like,
Yeah.
how many Bigfoot like? Is it just one Bigfoot that doesn't age, or is it like different Bigfoot all over like in these places where they
That
are
is
sighted?
that is a valid question because some people just don't know. They think it's one Bigfoot running around doing all these sightings. And I suppose if it was one person in a suit, that could happen. But the way these sightings occur are regional, and they tend to follow mountain ranges. And specifically, the most populated, the most, I should say, the most sightings that occur in and around populated
Mm,
areas, not so much in populated areas, but in the zones where the population centers. You leave those and you start going into the wilderness, and then you have dire wilderness where it's just so deep in the forest almost nobody goes in there, and there's this cross zone
mm-hmm.
where there's hiking trails and things like that. That's the area at the
Mm,
edges, where those two cross. That's where you have a lot of the sightings. Sometimes across roads you'll see them run across the road or whatever, but there's these happen mostly in the Pacific Northwest and lower mainland BC and upper BC, and
mm.
then they're scattered around other states like Florida, East Texas, Ohio, places like this, and then you also find them all over Canada, including the Maritimes. In here in Nova Scotia, you get a
What? Wait,
few,
wait, wait,
very
wait, wait,
few.
wait, 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 wait. Hold on, Sharon. Did you say including the Maritimes?
Yes, very few.
Okay. Oh, very
So
few.
that is that, yes. But now you can be really excited when you go out camping, because then you'll think maybe, or hiking, that maybe
Yeah.
you're being watched.
Yeah. So, but like, I guess now, while researching your book, what, like, what are some of the things people believe Bigfoot is? Like, is it like an animal, or is it like a cross between? Is it like an evolutionary one of, like, we used to be that before we became human beings?
Yeah, lots of those different views about what people think they are. I would say that the majority of people think they're some kind of animal, or uh, some kind of a crossbreed between ape and human. Not that they can breed, but it like a relict hominoid is the term that's used by scientists and anthropologists, some biologists and others, as to what they think this is from a scientific standpoint. If this creature really is
Mm-hmm.
existing out there, what it would it be related to? Well, it would be kind of humanish, but with more ape qualities. I mean, if you go back and look at Neanderthal, which is not anything like a Bigfoot, they're actually shorter than most humans today, and they were very thick bodied and stocky, and they had Neanderthal had a rib cage that was conical shaped, so more like an ape,
Oh.
rather than a human shaped rib cage, which
Mm,
is more barrel shaped. And so you have these
mm,
differences in different hominids that are prehumans. The prehuman skeletons and fossils that we find actually are just a different combination of traits, and
mm,
characteristics associated with different species at different times and different layers of the earth, geologically speaking. So you
mm,
find that they're different ages when you test them, and they all have, some of them have more ape qualities and some of them have less. And so, and
mm.
it's this, the Bigfoot has, they're tall, they're like 8 feet, sometimes
Oh,
seven or eight
wow.
feet or better. up to 10 feet, maybe sometimes 12. It depends. But the average,
Mm-hmm.
you could say, of sightings of people's guesses and where they stood against a tree that they could actually go back and measure, um,
Mm-hmm.
the 7, 8, 9, 10 feet. So
Damn.
depending on the gender too, because there's juveniles, people see young ones occasionally, or a mother with a baby. They'll see all
Oh.
kinds of things in the forest. Yes, so it's definitely not one particular animal. That they think there might be even different species. The ones in the Pacific Northwest tend to be more docile, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones in Florida tend to be more aggressive. The swamp ape, they call
Oh.
them. And so there's different, and then you've got the Yeti, which of course is the abominable snowman in the Himalayas, and they're quite mean.
Mm-hmm.
They can be quite mean, and so you have
Mm.
these different, and there's sightings of these creatures slightly different in every region, around the world on every continent. And so when you start mapping that, it's quite extensive, and it makes you really look at it deeper and say, well, could this phenomenon be real? And why don't we have, like, why we haven't we discovered them? Where are the bodies? How come we haven't found any bodies or fossils? Or, well, if they're related to hominids, if they really are relict hominoid, then we do have fossils, just not of that particular species at this time. You got to remember that it's
Mm-hmm.
really tough to get a fossil. You have to have extremely rare conditions in order to fossilize bones. Most everything, 99% of everything rots in the ground, or just, the weather takes it. So the
Well, I
elements.
didn't know that. So, what would be some of the conditions that bone becomes fossil?
Uh, a lot of it is anoxic, so there's not oxygen, or bugs or things like that. They'll get covered over, and buried, and then the sediment takes over, and then mineralization over time occurs. And so the minerals actually go in
Mm.
and grow and replace the original bone, so that when you find it, what you're finding is a replica of what was sitting there, that whatever was in that cavity before got eaten away, and
Mm.
it was replaced by minerals. And so that's why it lasts, because it's
Oh.
actually rock at that point. Yeah, that's how that happens.
Oh. So even if, say, Bigfoot was real and he died, its bone just became manure or something.
Yeah, pretty much. It just rots, goes away. And if they bury their
Mm-hmm.
dead, which is one of the things people have been looking at, is that perhaps they buried their dead. Even Neanderthal buried their dead and did rituals and had spiritual beliefs and things like
Oh.
that. So we don't know what they have. We don't know what kind of culture they might have if they exist. And we don't know if they exist for sure. Science has not said yes, they do. They just don't. We just don't know for sure. But if you look at the anecdotal
Mm.
evidence, which there's a huge body of evidence, it really points to that they do. But there's a lot of people that say they have unusual abilities, strange paranormal type abilities, like mind speak, which is like a telepathy. They'll be like in the forest, and suddenly they'll get this really bad feeling like they need to not be there, and they're actually told in their mind, leave, go. And
Mm.
there'll be like other evidence of Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the area, where there'll be like tree knocking sounds, or they'll find Bigfoot footprints, tracks in the ground, and things like that associated with these occurrences. And so sometimes a sighting, and so they relate that to the Bigfoot's telling them to leave, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
interesting stuff.
Um, is Bigfoot and Sasquatch the same thing, or
Yeah, they're
are
just
they
different names.
different?
Sasquatch actually comes. Yeah, no, it's the same thing. Bigfoot is the common name. Sasquatch is a little more regional. The native and tribal groups in around Washington State uh, uh, have different names for them, from stick
Mm.
Indian to a whole bunch of things that are hard to pronounce. But Seskek is the one of the old names that Sasquatch came from, and I cover a lot of that in the
Oh.
book too, like the whole history of different names of Bigfoot, and the Sasquatch is just the common one for that area. It's kind of spread
Mm.
around, so people still call them Sasquatch no matter where they are, but it was specifically for the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. And whew, so some people, have sightings, and then they form kind of this community and go on this search trying to locate Bigfoot. What in your research for the book were some of the reasons people came up with why, like, there's no definitive finding or location of Bigfoot?
Well, a lot of people have mapped it. So you'll have different groups. Like, let's say you can go on Facebook, and a lot of the research I did was in Facebook groups, Bigfoot groups specifically. Um, and there's just tons of them. And the ones I tended to stay in were 1,000 people or more, different members. Some of them had many thousands of members. And some of the people in there are researchers, some are just looky-loos. They just go around and lurk. Sometimes they have had a sighting and they just believe in Bigfoot, and so they go in these groups. They want to be heard. They want to talk about it with others. They want to say, this is what happened to me. Have you ever experienced this? And they
Mm.
find that there's a community of people that believe like they do, and they go through this liminal experience, and they start sharing data and information, and things spread from there. And so you have a lot of the whole thing is very much a cultural phenomenon as much as it is, something that happens to people outside of that.
Mm.
They might not even
Mm.
believe in Bigfoot when they have a sighting, and then they're changed because of that experience. And so they go
Exactly.
from unbeliever to believer, and some of them, just don't know what to do with that, especially if there were paranormal aspects involved, like mind speak, where they hear a message,
Oh.
or they see Bigfoot walking and then it just literally disappears in front of their eyes and camouflages in some way. We don't
Mm.
know. Some people say they've seen them walk into portals and go, and so then you get the UFO connection. And so you just don't know. And there's
Mm-hmm.
this whole groups of people that believe certain ways, and they tend to follow each other and in down different avenues of thought. And
Mm.
so some people think that they're an animal, but some say no, they're an interdimensional being from another world. So we don't know, because science hasn't said we've got one and this is
Yeah.
what they really are, because we've been able to study that. So right now we have
Yeah.
stories, anecdotal evidence. Hmm.
And then one of the things that stood out for me while reading the little synopsis of the book was when people that were unbelievers would now change to believers. And did you notice a trend? Like, would it be something they experienced personally, or just from anecdotes, or just from being in these groups?
A huge range of combination of things. I did a survey for 300 Bigfoot believers, um, and the survey only lasted 2 days, and I closed it after 300 people. And There were different results from that, um, including people that thought that they should be that they're just animals, and that we should kill one to bring in a body, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like, but most people are no kill. And so it's just some people have had experiences, some have not. Some are just believers because their uncle, who they trust, had a sighting, or you know what I
Mm.
mean? So there's the actual number of people who have had encounters. It's fairly low. However, they're really easy to find when you're in these Bigfoot groups. And other people say, yeah,
Oh.
I've had lots of experiences, but then they're all paranormal experiences, and you don't know. Those are the hardest ones, because you don't know how much they're experiencing for real versus experiencing in
Yeah.
their imagination, in their head, because
Yeah.
there's a huge amount of overlap. And when you bring in belief systems that support that, it makes it difficult from a scientific standpoint
Mm.
to say yes or no,
Yeah.
this is happening, without more
Mm.
evidence. And so we try to tell people, you gotta be more, because there's this joke about blob squatches. I don't know if you've ever heard about a blob
W-
squatch, but it's
No, that's what I'm saying.
it's
What is that?
photos. Well, you'll have photos. People take photos of Bigfoot, right? Oh, I've got, but a lot of them are hoaxes, and it's true. And I try not to cover hoaxers in my book. I don't want to give them the time of day. I want actual people that have
Yeah.
had experiences and things like that. So even if they, it doesn't matter what they believe, as long as they believe something about Bigfoot, and that they're not hoaxing or lying. But the people will be out there in the
Mm.
woods and they'll take a photo and they'll see something move and then they'll take another photo after, and it was clearly something that moved out of the way and that was there and then wasn't there. It wasn't like it was a
Oh, yeah.
shadow in the tree, in the bush, you know what I mean? It wasn't just a
Mm.
shadow that's always there, and it was at the same time of day in
Mm.
the same spot and everything. So, or just even a minute apart taking a photo and it's gone. So you've
Mm.
got all these different scenarios, but yeah, I don't even. It's difficult to to divide it all. I have made these divisions in my book. I covered just a
Mm.
whole chapter on anecdotal evidence and another section on physical evidence and what those are and what they look like and what people believe about them. And it's fascinating study. It really is.
It is. And my question to you is, I mean, apart from your passion for cryptozoology, why did you approach the book the way you decided to take it?
You know, it's interesting. I'm a cultural anthropologist, so I have interest in the culture, the cultural aspects behind these things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, such as personalities and archetypes and what people believe, and um, you know, how much is what I call the symbolic cultural projection effect, which is,
Mm.
you know, symbolic culture deals with philosophical concepts and united belief. So things like concepts like us versus them, the rich versus the poor, that rich people are smarter than the poor, or that good, there's
Mm.
such a thing as good and evil, currency having value. All those things are symbolic culture. Then you have a
Mm.
projection effect, which people project all the time. They project their own ideas onto Bigfoot or what Bigfoot is.
Mm.
And so it's a psychological defense mechanism. So our personal beliefs tend to get mixed up in those things. And so sometimes we can take the symbolic cultural projection effect is where you can take a human attribute or a concept
Yeah.
and assign it to Bigfoot in order to explain it. And this could include anthropomorphization, which is how we humanize Bigfoot, which you see in things like
Mm.
commercials, TV commercials where there's Bigfoot and he's talking on a cell
Yeah.
phone and we're humanizing him, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
and people do this out in the woods too. They go out in the woods and they see something move and they try to take a picture and they say, "Oh, it was talking to me and it was trying to give me a flower." And or it was doing this or it was doing that, and they a lot of times they're projecting their own belief systems onto the to what they think they're seeing. Whether it's really
Yeah.
there or not, we don't know, and whether it is really doing those things or not, we don't know. But this is how people explain it, and
Oh.
so this is the stuff
Yeah.
that I cover in the book is this is why people explain it, and this is what's behind why people do what they do and say what they say, and sometimes they don't even realize themselves that they're doing it. So I kind of cover those things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's good you mentioned that because I think it's a progressive ad. I think with Bigfoot in it, and Bigfoot is
Yep.
like a person, and he's like, oh, he's talking about he one of his he's talking about his foot in the commercial. It's actually funny. I guess I'm partial to Progressive and Geico commercials, but
Yes, both
yeah.
of those.
So you yeah. So, you spent 4 years working on this book. Uh, at what point did you know, okay, it's done? I mean, at least done enough for you to send it out.
uh, yes, I actually had despite that it was so large, I actually had to cut a chapter out and some other sections because it was just getting too
Yeah.
huge. It'll go into my next book. Um, I,
Exactly.
ha- believe it or not, COVID and the lockdown helped me a lot. I wrote the majority. I had all these notes and I had all this basic information pasted in whenever I had to do some studying and do some writing, and I'd throw it in there and I'd put it, but I actually got to sit down and I was writing 10 to 12 hours a day, most days
Mm.
during lockdown. And so for 2 months, I
Wow.
just did almost nothing but write. So
Mm.
I was able to finish it to the point where I felt that it was done. And I think, you know, COVID lockdown was bad for some people, but it was great for me.
And what how was that experience for you? Just focusing on writing and finishing this book that is pretty much 20 plus years in the making.
It was, it was kind of nice actually, because everything comes full circle when you have to address it. When you see it
Hmm.
and have to bring it up and you have to think about it, and you take for granted what you know. And so when you start writing it down and making all these categories and seeing it through other people's eyes, you learn not to take
Mm.
anything for granted. So
Yeah.
it wasn't that it was eye opening, because I've seen and heard so many things. I've had people tell me something, I had a guy after my book came out, I had a guy call me, and really nice guy, and we had the greatest
Hmm.
conversation, and he had to tell me his story. And I'm not going to tell you the story, but it was just that he was like, I got to tell you this, and I don't want you to freak out. I tell people this and they really freak out. And I'm like, I doubt anything will surprise me. I have seen it all, I have heard it all. I was a paranormal
Yeah.
and UFO investigator forever with the alien thing. I said nothing scares me or freaks me out or surprises me.
Yeah.
And we spoke coherently about what his experiences were. And I think it surprised him a bit, because I it's really hard to surprise me anymore with anything new. And most
Hmm.
people send me these recordings, and I'm just like, yeah, I've seen it all, heard it all. I don't even Not really interested too much with the same kind of thing over and over. After a while, it gets old, unless you
Yep.
something really piques your interest. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's fun. It's fun.
So, I mean, you really feel there is nothing you would hear that would be out of the ordinary now? I mean, after all the years of working on this?
No one surprised me for quite a while now. Occasionally I'll hear like a little piece of information that's like, "Oh, that's interesting," but not really freaks me out. No.
How about someone calls, it's like I read your book and blah 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 and I am Bigfoot.
I'd say prove it.
Oh my. Oh, okay.
Oh, and
Um
the blob squatch. I never explained the blob squatch to you. That reminds me, because I was thinking if he had to prove it, he might send me a picture of himself, right? So the blob squatch is a picture of Bigfoot that's just a blob. It's just like a shadow in a tree or some kind of thing.
yeah,
And they
it's
have to
somewhere
like put
there.
red circles. They have to put red circles and blow up the picture just for you to kind of see something, and you can't make it out, and that's not proof. I'm sorry. That's called pareidolia. That pareidolia is seeing recognizable faces and things in natural, anything in nature. So
Like
you
when people see the face of Jesus in boxes of cereal and stuff like that.
exactly. Yes. Yes, Jesus on the toast is
Yeah.
pareidolia. That is exactly right. Yep.
um
Just in your
so
natural
how big
surroundings,
is the
even if
next
they're
book going to
man-made.
be?
Oh God,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
hoping it's not
Um
nearly as
how,
as thick as the first one. It was a tome. It's a textbook, seriously. It's just too much.
um and like what will be the process of working on this next book for you?
I've started it already. I'm definitely have a
Oh,
lot of work to do before I can finish it, though. It's going to be a little while. I'm not working on it right now. I'm trying to just kind of relax a little and promote this book. And then
yes,
when
yes,
this
yes.
one's, yeah, and then there'll be a moment where I'll be like, yeah, I need to really get into this and start writing again. And there's some
Mm,
research parts that I need to do and a map that I need to make. That map that I mentioned to you that has there's sightings in every culture or in every continent around the world. There was a
mm-hmm,
map that I actually saw that in a history museum in Tacoma, Washington, when I lived up there, and
mm,
they gave me the data set, the information to they destroyed the map unfortunately when the exhibit went down in that museum,
oh
but
no.
I have the data, I have their original data that they saved, and I'm able to recreate the map. And so I've got to do that, and that takes quite a
Oh.
bit of research because I have to double
Yeah,
check
wait, is
everything
it like
before it can even.
since it's all the continents, it's all is like the map of the world then, right?
Yeah, and you're just taking this is what's called a place name map. So it's not just sightings, it's actually place names. So you've got like the word Sasquatch, which comes from Seskek. And let's say you researched the word Seskek and where did that show up, or Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, or spirit. Sometimes there's different words. Like stick Indian and things like that, that terms that you'll find that are regional or local for certain tribal peoples, or and then these places get named um,
Mm,
for that, and it sticks into the future, so there's places that still carry those names that were based
mm,
on things that happened there maybe originally. And so there's these
mm,
place names that deal with these creatures, and sightings of these beings. um, so that those are the terms that I'm researching to find out not only what they mean and where they're from, but also to take the lat longs, the latitude and longitude, so that it can be mapped on a GIS program. And my nephew does that work, so he will be able to map it for me once I gather the information.
what's
Yeah.
GIS?
Geographic Informational Systems, I think, is what it stands for, but it's a
Oh, okay.
program that helps you with cartography for map making, to actually put points on a map and make a map from scratch.
Oh, wow. Interesting and
Yeah.
super fascinating. So that's gonna be what, another 4 years of working on the second book?
I don't know how long it'll take. I'm hoping not that long this time around.
Okay.
I've done a lot of the background research for it already, and it has a skeleton. So
Mm.
so and some of it is from
So,
my original research area, and some of the
mm,
reports that I did and investigations I did. So a lot of that's already written, but the map has to be
mhm,
made, and there's some other things that have to be done. So it probably will not
mm.
take 4 years. I hope not, but I,
Okay.
but
I'm,
hopefully in the next couple.
yeah, I'm gonna let you go soon, but I'm curious though. What is your writing process, right? You do all this research, but they're actually putting the words on paper, or like like do you? How do you do it?
Because I start with an idea, and I start fleshing that out as an outline. I want to know
Hmm.
what headers I'm going to use, what's the big subjects first, and then what order I want to put them in, and then I start creating subheaders, and I just create an outline, and sometimes that changes, moves around. It depends on what I find too during my research. Sometimes I have to go in and actually research an area a little more than I've already done, and I find that maybe I need to create a new section for it, or sometimes a whole new chapter. But
Hmm.
I try to fit it in, and when I do the research, I go and I grab that information, or I do a survey or whatever, and then I throw that into the book in where it goes, and then I flesh it out that way. So through my mind, where how it should be organized, and then
Hmm.
I go through and I just start cleaning it up and making sure that it's all written properly. So, and then there's
Mm.
editing and proofreading, and it's just a huge process.
And I gotta ask, the cover page, the for Bigfoot Beyond Belief. What was your like? Did you have any input in that, or
The
how did
like
you
the
how
photo
did the
on
front
the
page?
front
Yeah,
cover.
yeah.
Um, the photo was of someone I knew, and I paid. We took pictures of that person, and I sent it to a graphic artist, and
Yeah.
paid her to change and alter that and morph it and turn it into a Bigfoot type face. And so that's what I did. And I paid for that years ago, many years ago, and I held on
Oh.
to it until it was ready to use. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because, I mean, I don't know what Bigfoot would look like, but I was like, oh, that's great. And do the colors, make play any role in the decision of making the front cover that way?
No, I really left that up to her. We tossed around ideas. Alex Evans was the graphic artist that I hired, and she's pretty well known in the Bigfoot community. And
Mm-hmm.
I had looked at different artists and I liked her work. So, but I kind of gave her free rein to do it how she wanted. She would send me renderings and we would approve them or change them, and
Mm,
so it was a little bit of a process. But I really liked what she did, and it's kind of a dark image. And since a lot of sightings happen at night, I felt that that was appropriate. So,
mm,
yeah, yeah, that's how that happened.
mm. So, and okay, before I kept saying before I let you go, because another question comes. So let's talk about the maritime sightings. Where have people seen them? So I kind of have an idea of where to either go to or stay away from.
I used to all over. There's some around in the south of the valley in Annapolis Valley.
Mhm.
There's been some on the South Shore, uh, up in Cape Breton, um,
Oh,
and New Glasgow area. There's an area around there, a provincial park, I believe it is, that has had a sighting in it semi recently in the last number of years, and
mm,
also right up the street from a house that I own in Thorburn, uh, which is 10 minutes outside of New Glasgow, and
wow,
there's an old historical sighting that happened there, and it was talking about how this creature came and stole somebody, like it abducted them, and
wow.
and that this creature is seen every 50 years. So evidently there was, at the time that was written, um, uh, evidently there was already stories that this creature comes every 50 years or so. Well, by the time I saw
Mm,
this historical write-up, um,
yeah.
there's a Maritimes group for Bigfoot, for Sasquatch, and it was uh, it was just a little clip for Thorburn, and it was right up the street, literally on my street, just right up the road from my
Whoa.
house. And I was like, oh, I missed the 50-year period where it would come back. But since there's been no stories in the area, maybe,
When is the next
if
when?
this even happens.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But when is the next 50 year coming? Like when is the next 50 year stop?
Oh, another 40 something years probably.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just
okay. Never
it
mind.
literally, yeah, don't worry about it. I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't sweat it while you're out hiking.
Yeah. Oh man,
You don't
Sharon,
have to
thank
worry
you.
about getting abducted by Bigfoot. Sorry.
Oh my god, thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you for spending
Yeah,
all this
thank you too.
time writing your book, and the book is available on Amazon. Where else can people get your book?
Amazon and Amazon. Yes, Amazon. That's where I have it for sale. They can actually get
Yeah.
a signed copy from me, but with it's often people from the States, and can if they're in Canada, and if they're in Nova Scotia, I can get them one fairly cheap, but the shipping is quite expensive for such a heavy, thick book.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't want to pay that, but they could get one for me if they want a signed copy. They're just going to pay through the nose. But Amazon is the place. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Okay, thank you.